Have you ever felt like your life is more than routine, like you're on a hidden quest, even in ordinary moments? What if your struggles, your ambitions, and even your mistakes aren't random at all? What if ancient patterns, buried deep in the collective unconscious, are quietly shaping every decision you make? According to Carl Jung, archetypes like the hero, the sage, and the trickster aren't just myths or symbols. They're living forces within you, guiding your fears, your strengths, and the destiny you're slowly stepping into. And once you recognize them, you can't unsee the path anymore. Ever feel like you're on a quest, facing dragons and searching for hidden treasure, even when your life looks ordinary from the outside? Maybe the dragon shows up as uncertainty about your career, a relationship that tests your limits, or a quiet sense that you're meant for something more, but you can't quite name it. Maybe the treasure isn't gold, but clarity, peace, or a feeling of wholeness you've been chasing for years. If any of this feels familiar, it's not because you're dramatic or lost in fantasy. It's because your life is a myth, one that is unfolding right now through you. When we hear the word myth, we often think of ancient stories, gods and heroes, distant cultures, or fictional worlds that have nothing to do with modern life. But myth was never meant to be an escape from reality. It was meant to explain it, long before psychology, before self-help books, before productivity systems and life coaches. Humans used myth to make sense of suffering, growth, love, fear, and transformation. Myths were not entertainment. They were maps, inner maps, for navigating existence. And even though the language has changed, those maps are still operating beneath the surface of your daily life. This is where the work of Carl Jung becomes so powerful. Jung understood that human beings are not guided only by logic, habits, or social conditioning. Beneath our personal memories lies something deeper and older, the collective unconscious. This is a shared psychological inheritance, a reservoir of universal patterns that shape how humans experience the world. These patterns are what Jung called archetypes, and they are the living core of myth. They don't belong to any one culture or era. They show up everywhere, because they live inside us. When you feel called to leave what's familiar and step into the unknown, that is not random anxiety or restlessness. That is the same call that echoes through every heroic myth ever told. When you resist change, cling to comfort, or fear what might happen if you take the next step, that too is part of the story. Myths never begin with certainty, they begin with disruption. Something no longer fits, something must change. The hero doesn't volunteer for comfort, the hero is summoned by necessity. In your own life, this call may arrive quietly. It might feel like dissatisfaction you can't explain, a sense of stagnation, or a persistent question that won't go away. Why am I here? Is this really all there is? Why does this keep happening to me? These questions are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signals that your story is moving into a new chapter. The myth is asking you to pay attention. Modern life often teaches us to ignore this call. We're told to be practical, to follow safe paths, to suppress doubts, to keep going even when something inside us feels misaligned. But myths warn us what happens when the call is refused. Energy turns inward, life feels dull or heavy. Anxiety and frustration grow. The dragon doesn't disappear just because you avoid it. It waits, growing stronger until it must be faced. In psychological terms, what we avoid consciously returns unconsciously, through patterns, conflicts, and repeated struggles. To say your life is a myth is not to deny responsibility or reality. It's to recognize that your experiences have symbolic meaning. The challenges you face are not arbitrary punishments. They are invitations to develop qualities you don't yet fully embody. Courage, wisdom, patience, boundaries, compassion. These are not learned in comfort. They are forged in confrontation. Every myth understands this. Transformation requires descent before ascent. You must enter the forest before you can find your way out. When Jung spoke about individuation, he was describing this mythic process in psychological language. Individuation is not about becoming perfect or successful by external standards. It is about becoming whole, integrating the parts of yourself you've ignored, rejected, or never developed. This includes your strengths, but also your fears, your anger, your vulnerability, and your shadow. In myth, the shadow often appears as a monster or enemy. In real life, it shows up as habits you're ashamed of, emotions you suppress, or traits you criticize in others because you haven't accepted them in yourself. Acknowledging that your life is a myth changes how you see your problems. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is this asking of me?" Instead of feeling trapped by circumstances, you start to look for meaning within them. This doesn't make pain disappear, but it gives pain a context. Suffering without meaning feels unbearable. Suffering with meaning becomes a teacher. Think about the crossroads in your life, the moments where a choice changed everything. or where fear stopped you from choosing at all. From a mythic perspective, crossroads are sacred places. They represent thresholds between who you have been and who you might become. Standing at a crossroads is uncomfortable because certainty dissolves there. But myths remind us that destiny is not found by staying still. It is revealed through movement, through risk, through engagement with the unknown. Your relationships, too, follow mythic patterns. Lovers, rivals, mentors, and tricksters appear at precisely the moments they are needed. Some people support your growth. Some awaken parts of you you didn't know existed. Others force you to confront boundaries and self-respect. In myth, no character is accidental. Each plays a role in shaping the hero. In life, the same is true, though we rarely see it clearly while we're inside the story. One of the most liberating realizations that comes from this perspective is that you are not behind in life. Beneath your habits, opinions, and carefully constructed identity lives an entire inner pantheon, a cast of timeless psychological forces that quietly shape how you think, choose, love, fear, and act. You may believe your decisions are purely rational or shaped only by personal experience, but according to Carl Jung, something far older is at work within you. Jung called these forces archetypes primal, inherited patterns of thought and behavior that are woven into the human psyche itself. They are not learned in childhood, nor invented by culture. They are universal, and whether you recognize them or not, they are already guiding your life. Archetypes are not characters you consciously choose to play. They are deep psychological instincts, ways of perceiving and responding to reality that have been repeated across thousands of generations. This is why the same types of characters appear in myths, religions, dreams, films, and stories across every culture on Earth. The hero who leaves home, the wise elder who offers guidance, the trickster who disrupts order, the caregiver who sacrifices for others, the creator who brings something new into the world. These figures endure because they reflect structures within the human mind itself. To understand archetypes is to realize that your personality is not a single voice but a conversation. Inside you, multiple archetypal energies compete, cooperate, and conflict. At one moment, the hero may push you toward ambition and challenge. At another, the caregiver may urge you to protect, nurture, or endure. The trickster may whisper rebellion, humor, or sabotage. The sage may pull you back into reflection and meaning. You are not inconsistent for feeling torn between these impulses. You are human. The hero archetype is often the most visible. It is the part of you that wants to prove yourself, overcome obstacles, and transform struggle into strength. When you set goals, take risks, or endure hardship in pursuit of something meaningful, the hero is active. This archetype thrives on challenge. Without something to overcome, it grows restless, frustrated, or reckless. Many people feel lost not because they lack comfort, but because their hero has no worthy quest. When life becomes too safe or predictable, the hero may turn inward, manifesting as self-criticism, burnout, or unnecessary conflict. But the hero cannot function alone. Without balance, it becomes obsessed with victory, identity, or external validation. This is where the sage archetype plays a crucial role. The sage is the part of you that seeks understanding rather than conquest. It values truth over status, insight over applause. When you reflect deeply, question assumptions, or search for meaning beyond appearances, the sage is speaking. This archetype reminds you that not every problem can be solved through force or effort. Some require patience, perspective, and wisdom. In modern life, the sage is often neglected. Speed, productivity, and certainty are rewarded more than contemplation. Yet when the sage is ignored, life can feel shallow even if it looks successful from the outside. Achievements lose their flavor. Questions go unanswered. The result is often a quiet existential dissatisfaction, a sense that something essential is missing. The sage doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you don't slow down enough to listen, you may miss its guidance entirely. Then there is the trickster, perhaps the most misunderstood archetype of all. The trickster disrupts routines, breaks rules, exposes hypocrisy, and mocks false authority. In maths, the trickster is chaotic, playful, and unpredictable. Psychologically, it represents the part of you that resists rigid structures and challenges what has become stagnant. It shows up when you procrastinate, joke at inappropriate times, or feel the urge to rebel against expectations that feel suffocating. The trickster is not evil, though it is often blamed when things go wrong. Its deeper function is transformation. By creating disorder, it reveals where order has become lifeless. When expressed unconsciously, the trickster can sabotage goals, damage relationships, or create unnecessary drama. But when integrated consciously, it becomes creativity, humor, adaptability, and innovation. It helps you loosen identities that no longer fit and reminds you not to take yourself, or life, too seriously. Closely connected to this is the creator archetype, the force within you that longs to bring something new into existence. This does not only apply to artists or inventors. The creator is active whenever you imagine a new future, build a project, shape an idea, or redesign your life. It is driven by vision rather than necessity. The creator asks not, "What must I do?" but, "What could exist because of me?" When this archetype is alive, life feels meaningful and expressive. When it is suppressed, people often feel empty, bored, or trapped in repetition. The shadow side of the creator appears as perfectionism or fear of failure. The desire to create can become paralyzing if you believe what you produce must justify your worth. Jung warned that every archetype has both light and dark expressions. Integration does not mean eliminating the dark side, but becoming aware of it. Awareness gives you choice. Without awareness, the archetype controls you from behind the scenes. Another powerful presence in the inner pantheon is the caregiver. This archetype drives empathy, responsibility, and devotion. It is the part of you that feels fulfilled by helping others, protecting the vulnerable, and maintaining connection. The caregiver builds families, communities, and emotional safety. In its healthy form, it expresses love without self-erasure. In its distorted form, it becomes martyrdom, resentment, or codependence. Many people unconsciously build their entire identity around the caregiver. They become indispensable to others while abandoning themselves. Over time, this imbalance leads to exhaustion and bitterness. Jung emphasized that archetypes must be balanced. The caregiver must be supported by boundaries, self-respect, and other archetypes, especially the hero who defends and the sage, who at certain points in life, everything feels unstable at once. A career no longer fits. A relationship reaches a breaking point. A sudden loss, an unexpected opportunity, or a quiet but persistent sense of dissatisfaction forces you to stop and ask, "What now?" These moments can feel overwhelming because familiar maps no longer work. Logic alone offers limited guidance, and advice from others often contradicts your inner experience. But what if you already possess an inner navigation system, one that activates precisely during times of crisis, transition, and choice? According to Carl Jung, this inner guidance comes from archetypes, deep psychological patterns that orient you toward growth when the old way of being can no longer sustain you. Think of archetypes as a kind of psychological GPS. They don't tell you exactly where to go, but they help you understand how to move forward. They interpret the terrain of your life, danger zones, dead ends, unexplored paths, and translate confusion into meaningful direction. When you feel lost, it's often because the archetype that once guided you is no longer sufficient for the stage you're entering. Growth requires a shift in inner leadership. Consider a career crossroads. You may feel torn between security and fulfillment, between staying where you are and stepping into uncertainty. If the hero archetype is dominant, you might feel compelled to push harder, prove yourself, or conquer the next challenge. Even if exhaustion is setting in, the hero thrives on effort and endurance, but when overused, it mistakes struggle for meaning. At this point, the sage archetype may need to take the lead, asking deeper questions. Why am I pursuing this path? What values am I serving? What kind of life am I actually trying to build? Without the sage, the hero keeps running without direction. Alternatively, the creator archetype may be calling you during this transition. Instead of asking how to win within an existing system, the creator asks how to design something new. This might mean starting a project, redefining your role, or reshaping your work to better reflect who you are becoming. The creator does not promise safety, it promises authenticity. When you ignore this archetype, dissatisfaction grows, even if outward success continues. Relationships offer another clear example of archetypal navigation. During conflict, different archetypes push for different responses. The caregiver may urge you to accommodate, forgive, and preserve harmony at all costs. This can be healing, but it can also lead to self-abandonment if boundaries are not honored. The hero may approach relationship challenges as battles to be won, arguments to dominate, or problems to fix through force of will. This often escalates tension rather than resolving it. In moments like these, the lover archetype becomes essential. The lover values connection, presence, and emotional truth. It asks you to listen rather than defend, to feel rather than strategize. When activated consciously, the lover transforms conflict into intimacy and misunderstanding into dialogue. But the lover also carries risk, vulnerability, rejection, emotional exposure. Avoiding this archetype may protect you from pain, but it also limits depth and authenticity in relationships. Sometimes, however, relationships don't need repair, they need transformation or release. This is where the trickster archetype may appear, disrupting patterns that have become rigid or dishonest. The trickster exposes illusions, challenges unspoken rules, and forces uncomfortable truths into the open. When expressed unconsciously, it may manifest as sarcasm, passive aggression, or impulsive behavior. When integrated consciously, it becomes humor, perspective, and the courage to name what others avoid. Major life transitions, such as moving to a new place, entering parenthood, or confronting loss, often activate archetypes we haven't relied on before. This unfamiliarity can feel disorienting. You may think you're failing when in reality, you're simply learning to navigate with a new inner compass. Jung emphasized that psychological growth is not linear. It unfolds in cycles, each demanding different strengths. The archetype that once kept you safe may now keep you small. During periods of grief or failure, the innocent archetype often re-emerges. This archetype seeks meaning, hope, and renewal after devastation. It reminds you that not everything must be earned through struggle, that trust and openness still have a place, even after disappointment. Many people suppress the innocent out of fear of being Nadvi. But without it, life becomes cynical and heavy. Growth requires not just resilience, but the willingness to begin again. Understanding your archetypal influences does not mean labeling yourself permanently. You are not a hero or a caregiver in a fixed sense. Archetypes are situational. They rise and fall depending on what life is asking of you. The key is awareness. When you can recognize which archetype is driving your reactions, you gain distance from automatic behavior. You move from being possessed by an archetype to partnering with it. This awareness is especially powerful during moments of overwhelm. When everything feels urgent, the mind narrows. You react instead of responding. Archetypal insight widens the lens. It helps you see that overwhelm often signals a mismatch between the challenge you're facing and the archetype you're relying on. For example, trying to solve an emotional crisis with pure logic often fails, not because logic is useless, but because the sage cannot replace the lover. Likewise, trying to fix structural problems through empathy alone may exhaust the caregiver without resolving the issue. Calling instead for the hero or the ruler to establish boundaries and decisive action. Life's setbacks often feel like punishment, but from an archetypal perspective, they are course corrections. They interrupt patterns that have outlived their usefulness. A failed venture may be forcing the creator to evolve. A broken relationship may be urging the lover to mature. A burnout may be signaling that the hero needs rest, integration, or a new quest. When you view setbacks this way, blame dissolves. Curiosity replaces shame. Empowered action emerges when you consciously choose the archetype best suited for the moment. This does not mean suppressing fear or doubt. It means responding with intention rather than reflex. Before making a major decision, you can ask yourself, which part of me is speaking right now? Is this the voice of courage, fear, wisdom, rebellion, or care? And is it the right guide for this terrain? These questions slow impulsive reactions and reconnect you with meaning. Over time, this practice builds trust in yourself. You stop searching endlessly for external validation or perfect certainty. You learn to navigate ambiguity with inner alignment. Jung believed that the goal of psychological development was not control, but wholeness, the ability to hold multiple truths without fragmentation. Archetypes are the language through which this wholeness becomes intelligible. Your life will continue to present crossroads. No system can eliminate uncertainty. But with archetypal awareness, uncertainty becomes navigable. You may not always know the outcome, but you understand the direction of growth. You recognize when life is calling for courage, when it is asking for reflection, when it demands creation, care, or disruption. The path may still be challenging, but it no longer feels meaningless. In this sense, your archetypal GPS does not remove obstacles, it reveals their purpose. It transforms confusion into initiation, crisis into transition, and choice into character. And as you learn to read these inner signals, you begin to realize something profound: you were never truly lost. You were learning how to listen. Most people approach personal growth as a search for their best self. The strongest traits, the most admirable qualities, the version of themselves they're proud to show the world. They want to be confident, productive, loving, disciplined, wise. In archetypal terms, they want to identify their hero, their sage, their creator, and live from those energies as much as possible. But according to Carl Jung, this approach is incomplete and ultimately limiting. True psychological growth does not come from amplifying only the light. It comes from integrating the full spectrum of who you are, including the parts you would rather deny, hide, or disown. This is where the concept of the shadow becomes essential. The shadow is not simply bad behavior or moral failure. It is everything within you that your conscious identity has rejected. Traits you were taught were unacceptable. Emotions that felt dangerous to express. Desires that didn't fit the image you were trying to maintain. Over time, these elements didn't disappear. They went underground. They became unconscious. And whatever remains unconscious does not remain inactive. It shapes your reactions, your projections, your blind spots, and your repeated patterns in ways you rarely recognize in the moment. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he wasn't describing a flaw in human nature. He was describing a universal psychological mechanism. To function in society, every individual must develop a persona, a socially acceptable mask. The shadow forms naturally as a counterbalance to that mask. If you learn to be the good one, your shadow may carry anger and selfishness. If you learn to be strong and independent, your shadow may hold vulnerability and need. If you pride yourself on being rational, your shadow may contain emotion and intuition. None of this makes you broken. It makes you human. The danger begins when we confuse repression with growth. Many people believe that being evolved means no longer feeling jealousy, rage, envy, insecurity, or fear. In reality, it often means these emotions have simply been pushed out of awareness. The shadow then finds indirect ways to express itself, through sarcasm, judgment, passive aggression, self-sabotage, or intense emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to the situation. What we refuse to see in ourselves, we almost inevitably see in others. This is why projection is such a powerful clue to shadow material. The traits that irritate you most, the behaviors you judge harshly, the people you feel unusually reactive toward. These often mirror something unresolved within you. That doesn't mean others are innocent or flawless. It means your emotional charge is signaling unfinished inner work. Jung famously said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Archetypes too have shadows. The hero's shadow appears as arrogance, domination, or a compulsive need to prove worth through struggle. The caregiver's shadow shows up as martyrdom, resentment, or control disguised as help. The sage's shadow can become detachment, cynicism, or intellectual superiority. The lover's shadow may express itself as obsession, dependency, or loss of boundaries. The trickster's shadow turns creativity into chaos and humor into cruelty. Every archetype contains both light and dark expressions. Integration means acknowledging both without being possessed by either. Many people unknowingly live from a split archetypal identity. They consciously identify with one role while unconsciously acting out its opposite. Someone who sees themselves as endlessly kind may harbor suppressed rage that erupts unexpectedly. Someone who prides themselves on independence may secretly crave rescue or validation. This inner split creates exhaustion because it takes enormous energy to maintain a one-sided self-image. The shadow does not ask to take over, it asks to be recognized. Integrating the shadow does not mean indulging destructive impulses, it means developing a relationship with them. Anger, for example, is not something to eliminate, it is energy. When ignored, it turns inward as depression or outward as aggression. When understood, it becomes clarity, boundaries, and self-respect. Fear, when denied, becomes paralysis or avoidance. When acknowledged, it becomes discernment and humility. Even envy, when faced honestly, can reveal unacknowledged desires or unrealized potential. One of the most transformative shifts occurs when you stop asking, "How do I get rid of this part of me?" and start asking, "What is this part trying to protect or express?" Shadow work is not about self-criticism, it is about self-curiosity. The shadow formed for a reason, often to protect you in environments where certain traits were unsafe or unwelcome. Honoring that original function softens resistance and opens the door to integration. Practical integration begins with awareness. Pay attention to emotional spikes, moments when your reaction feels stronger than the situation warrants. Ask yourself what was triggered, not what happened externally, but what stirred internally. Was it a fear of being dismissed, a threat to your identity, a reminder of an old wound? These moments are gateways to shadow material. Instead of suppressing them or acting them out, observe them. Another powerful practice is reclaiming disowned qualities. Make a list of traits you strongly dislike in others. Then gently explore how those traits might exist in you in smaller, subtler, or unexpressed ways. This is uncomfortable work, but it is also liberating. As you reclaim these qualities, you gain access to their positive potential. Aggression becomes assertiveness, stubbornness becomes perseverance, self-focus becomes self-worth. Dreams are another doorway into the shadow. Jung viewed dreams as direct communications from the unconscious, often using symbolic language to express what the conscious mind avoids. Characters in dreams frequently represent aspects of yourself, especially those you don't consciously identify with. Paying attention to recurring dream figures, emotions, or themes can reveal which archetypal energies are seeking integration. Relationships, too, are mirrors. Intimate relationships in particular bring shadow material to the surface because they bypass the persona. The closer someone gets, the harder it is to maintain a mask. Conflicts often arise not because of incompatibility, but because each person's shadow is being activated. When approached consciously, these moments can deepen self-knowledge rather than simply creating blame. Integrating your archetypal spectrum also means allowing yourself to be complex. You can be strong and tender, ambitious and tired, loving and angry, wise and uncertain. Wholeness is not purity, It is inclusion. Jung believed that the goal of psychological development was not perfection, but totality. The capacity to hold opposites without fragmentation. This inner wholeness produces a quiet confidence that does not depend on constant self-improvement. As shadow integration progresses, a surprising thing happens: energy returns. The parts of yourself that were locked away begin to contribute rather than sabotage. Creativity increases. Emotional reactions soften. Compassion, for yourself and others, deepens. You stop fighting yourself internally, and that inner peace reflects outwardly in more authentic relationships and choices. Perhaps most importantly, integrating shadow and light restores meaning to suffering. Instead of seeing your struggles as evidence of failure, you begin to see them as invitations to expand your identity. Each challenge reveals an aspect of yourself that wants recognition. Each repeated pattern points to an archetype seeking balance. Life stops feeling like a series of random obstacles and starts to feel like an initiation into greater selfhood. In this way, shadow work is not a detour from growth. It is the path itself. The more of yourself you are willing to face, the less of yourself you need to hide. And as the inner divisions heal, something subtle but profound emerges: a sense of inner alignment. You no longer need to perform a role to feel worthy. You become real, and in becoming real, you unlock strengths that were never accessible to the mask alone. To integrate your archetypal spectrum is to accept that you are not a single story, but a living myth composed of many voices. Light gives direction, shadow gives depth. Together they make you whole. Understanding archetypes is not about squeezing yourself into a predefined role or labeling who you are in fixed terms. It is not about deciding once and for all that you are the hero, the sage, or the creator and then trying to live up to that image. That kind of thinking only replaces one rigid identity with another. What archetypal awareness truly offers is something far more powerful: a language for understanding your inner life, your recurring patterns, and the deeper logic behind your choices. It gives you the ability to read your own story while you are living it, and more importantly, to influence how that story unfolds. For much of life, people live as if they are characters in a script written by someone else. Family expectations, cultural norms, fears formed in childhood, and unconscious habits quietly dictate direction. Decisions feel reactive rather than intentional. Opportunities are either grasped impulsively or avoided out of fear. Looking back, life can feel like a series of things that just happened. But from a psychological perspective shaped by the work of Carl Jung, this sense of powerlessness is not inevitable. It is the result of unconscious authorship. When the deeper forces within you are unseen, they write the plot without your consent. Becoming the author of your myth begins with a shift in perspective. Instead of asking only what you want or what you should do, you begin asking what part of you is speaking. Is this decision driven by fear or by growth? Is it the voice of caution, ambition, loyalty, rebellion, or longing? Each of these voices corresponds to an archetypal energy. When you can identify which archetype is active, you gain distance from it. That distance creates choice. You are no longer possessed by the impulse, you are in dialogue with it. This is where intention replaces reaction. Instead of unconsciously repeating familiar patterns, you start responding with awareness. If you notice that your hero archetype dominates your life, pushing you to constantly strive, prove, and endure, you can ask whether this is truly the energy required right now. Perhaps what the moment calls for is reflection, creativity, or rest. If the caregiver has defined your identity for years, you may begin to sense the quiet exhaustion underneath and recognize the need to reclaim boundaries or ambition. Archetypal insight does not eliminate inner conflict, but it transforms confusion into clarity. One of the most practical steps you can take to deepen this awareness is observation. Pay attention to moments of strong emotion. Excitement, anger, fear, shame, inspiration. These emotional surges often mark archetypal activation. Instead of immediately acting on them, pause. Ask yourself what role is trying to take control of the story. Over time, patterns emerge. You begin to see which archetypes you default to under stress, which ones you rely on for safety, and which ones you neglect entirely. This awareness alone begins to change behavior, because what is seen can no longer operate entirely in the dark. Another step is narrative reframing. Every life event can be interpreted in multiple ways. A setback can be seen as failure, or as initiation. A loss can be framed as punishment, or as transformation. When you view your experiences through a mythic lens, events take on symbolic meaning. Challenges become thresholds. Repetition becomes instruction. You stop asking only how to escape discomfort and start asking what kind of person this moment is shaping you to become. This does not romanticize pain, it contextualizes it. Meaning does not remove difficulty, but it makes difficulty bearable. To craft your destiny consciously, you must also confront the stories you tell about yourself. Many people unknowingly live inside inherited myths. I am the responsible one. I am the strong one. I am the outsider. I am the one who sacrifices. These stories once served a purpose, often protecting you or helping you belong. But over time, they can become cages. Archetypal work invites you to revise these narratives, not by rejecting who you've been, but by expanding who you are allowed to be. The myth evolves when the character grows. Intentional choice is another cornerstone of authorship. Small, repeated choices shape destiny more than dramatic moments ever do. When you act in alignment with an archetype that supports growth rather than fear, you reinforce a new trajectory. Choosing to speak honestly instead of staying silent strengthens the lover and the truth teller. Choosing to begin a project instead of endlessly planning empowers the creator. Choosing to set a boundary instead of overextending activates a mature hero. These actions may feel uncomfortable at first, but discomfort is often the sensation of expansion. Equally important is learning when not to act. Sometimes crafting your destiny means resisting the urge to repeat old behaviors. The trickster may push you toward impulsive escape. The hero may demand constant motion. The caregiver may insist on self-neglect. Authorship requires discernment, the ability to pause and decide whether an impulse aligns with your deeper purpose or simply maintains a familiar identity. This pause is subtle, but it is where freedom lives. Purpose itself becomes clearer through this process. Rather than being a single destination or career title, purpose reveals itself as a pattern of meaning. It shows up in the kinds of problems you are drawn to solve, the themes that repeat across different phases of life, the archetypes that feel most alive when you are engaged and fulfilled. When your actions align with these deeper patterns, life feels coherent, even when it is challenging. When they don't, even success can feel hollow. Embracing your mythic journey also requires patience. Myths unfold over time. There are seasons of action and seasons of waiting, periods of clarity and periods of confusion. Trying to force resolution too quickly often leads to frustration. Jung emphasized that development happens in stages, each with its own tasks. Trusting the timing of your story does not mean being passive. It means understanding that not every chapter is meant to look the same. Some chapters build strength, others build insight. Both are necessary. As you grow more conscious of your inner archetypes, something subtle but profound changes in how you relate to the world. You stop comparing your path to others quite so obsessively. You recognize that different lives are shaped by different mythic patterns. What fulfills one person may suffocate another. This realization brings both humility and confidence. Humility, because you no longer assume your way is the way. Confidence, because you stop measuring your worth against standards that were never meant for your story. Power in this context is not dominance or control over others. It is authorship over your own direction. It is the ability to choose alignment over approval, meaning over habit, growth over comfort. When you step into this kind of power, fear does not disappear, but it no longer rules. Fear becomes one voice among many, not the narrator of your life. Ultimately, crafting your destiny is not about creating a flawless story. Myths are filled with mistakes, detours, losses, and moments of doubt. What makes them meaningful is not perfection, but transformation. The character at the end is not the same as the one at the beginning. By embracing your mythic journey, you accept that change is not a sign of failure, it is the point. The extraordinary life waiting for you is not hidden somewhere outside. It is revealed gradually as you become more honest with yourself, more aware of your inner forces, and more willing to act in alignment with what truly matters. When you claim authorship of your myth, life stops feeling like something that happens to you. It becomes something that moves through you, with intention, depth, and purpose. If there is one truth that runs beneath everything you've heard, it is this: your life was never meant to be lived on autopilot. You were never meant to be only a role, only a mask, only the version of yourself that felt safest or most acceptable. Beneath your routines, your fears, your ambitions, and even your doubts, something deeper has always been moving, quietly shaping your choices, nudging you toward growth, and asking you to become more fully yourself. This is not an abstract idea. This is the lived reality of being human. Carl Jung believed that the greatest tragedy of a life is not failure, pain, or uncertainty, but unconsciousness. To live without knowing the forces that move you is to be driven by them blindly. To live with awareness is to step into authorship, not control, not perfection, but participation. When you begin to recognize the archetypes within you, the hero, the caregiver, the sage, the trickster, the creator, the shadow, you are no longer just reacting to life. You are entering into dialogue with it. This is why your struggles matter. This is why your confusion matters. This is why the parts of you that feel broken, delayed, or contradictory are not mistakes. They are messages. Every inner conflict is a signal that something within you wants to be seen, integrated, and honored. Every emotional trigger is an invitation to reclaim a part of yourself you once had to hide. Every setback is a threshold, asking not, "What did you do wrong?" but "Who are you becoming now?" When you stop dividing yourself into good and bad, strong and weak, successful and failing, something softens inside you. You realize that wholeness was never about eliminating darkness. It was about learning how to carry it without being consumed by it. The shadow you feared was never your enemy. It was your unlived life, waiting patiently for permission to return. There is profound grief in this realization. Grief for the years spent performing instead of living. Grief for the versions of yourself that were silenced to keep peace, earn love, or survive. Grief for the courage you postponed, the truths you swallowed, the paths you didn't take because you weren't ready to see yourself fully. Let that grief be felt. It is not weakness, it is evidence of awakening. And there is also profound hope here. Because awareness changes everything. The moment you see an archetypal pattern, it loosens its grip. The moment you name a shadow, it begins to transform. You may not change your life overnight, but you change your relationship to it, and that is where real power lies. Not the power to dominate life, but the power to meet it honestly. You will still feel fear. You will still doubt yourself. You will still face moments where the path ahead is unclear. But now you will recognize these moments not as signs of failure, but as signals of transition. You will know that when life feels heavy, an old identity may be dying. When you feel restless, a new archetype may be asking to lead. When you feel lost, you may be standing at the edge of something meaningful. This is what it means to live mythically, not in fantasy, but in depth. To understand that your life is not random even when it is painful. That meaning is not something you wait for. It is something you cultivate through attention, courage, and integration. Your destiny is not a fixed endpoint written somewhere outside you. It is an unfolding relationship between who you have been and who you are willing to become. So listen closely to yourself, not just to your thoughts, but to your emotions, your dreams, your reactions, your longings. They are speaking in an ancient language. They are telling you where growth is required, where truth is being avoided, where life wants more of you. You don't need to silence these voices. You need to learn how to hear them without fear. And remember this, you do not have to become someone else to live a meaningful life. You have to become more yourself. Not the self you were taught to perform, but the self that includes strength and softness, courage and fear, light and shadow. Integration does not make you smaller or safer. It makes you real. Your story is not over. In many ways, it is just beginning. The moment you choose awareness over avoidance, honesty over image, wholeness over comfort, you step onto the path Jung called individuation. It is not an easy path, but it is a truthful one. And it leads not to perfection, but to presence. So wherever you are right now, confused, inspired, wounded, hopeful, know this: you are not behind. You are not broken. You are in process. And the forces shaping your life are not against you. They are calling you forward. The only question that remains is not whether you have a destiny. It's whether you are ready to meet it.